purpose of this lesson is to learn what AutoFilter is and how to use it, how to use AutoFilter to filter data, what a pivot table is and how to use it, how to filter data sets, the data model, and how to use charts. In the GUI for Excel, we have this thing called Advanced Filter. It's an excellent utility that allows us to filter data based on criteria. Behind the scenes, the filters are still applied using what are called AutoFilter commands. This is actually an older utility from older versions of Excel. They've simply renamed it, but behind the scenes it's still called AutoFilter. It can filter data based on ranges and conditions. We can hide or show data, we can color fields, we can delete records, we can copy data, and a lot of other stuff. Any of the AutoFilter commands are going to consist of at least two parts. The first part is that we need to perform the filter. So what we're doing is we're looking for some sort of criteria. So you'll see here that we're using a range, and the range in this case is going to be C1. And then we're going to use the AutoFilter, and what we're doing is we're looking for a criteria where something is equal to A. And then the next thing is we're going to apply the formatting. So the next line here is the actual application of the formatting that we want to do to whatever range was selected by the filter. One of the problems that you'll encounter is when you use the AutoFilter, it automatically will hide all of the rows that do not meet the specific criteria. So what we need to do is we need to turn on all of the rows at the end of all of our conditional statements by simply stating ActiveSheet.ShowAllData. So what will happen is if we apply conditions to, say, like a range of objects, and we want to find all of the specific version of a car, only that particular car would be shown because it filters out all of the rest of the data. Well, if I want to show all of the rows and just simply color the rows that were matching that criteria, the other ones would be hidden, so we have to turn those back on. I created a new blank worksheet, and it has a list of students, grades, and grade letters. And what I want to do is I want to filter out all of the students that received a grade of an F. And what I want to do is I want to color those red, so that way we can very easily look at it and see the students that received an F. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a new method that's going to be responsible for using the AutoFilter. So I'm going to call it sub_use_AutoFilter. And then inside of our filter here, what I want to do is I want to filter out all of the fields that match the criteria of the grade being an F. Alright, so the way that we're going to do this is we need to specify the range where the information starts. So I'm going to start at A1, and then we're going to do .AutoFilter. And so what we're doing is we want to filter out data based on a field, and the field that we're using is going to be equal to 3 because we're looking at column 3, which is C. And then what are we looking for? So we have these criteria that we can match, and we start with criteria 1, and we can have two different criteria. So what we're looking for is we want to look for all the grades that are F. And so what we're doing is we're saying look in this range starting at A1, run the AutoFilter based on field 3, column 3, and then look for the criteria of an F. So the first part is find the data. The next part is then we want to actually apply some sort of condition to it. So in this case, I want to turn it red. Okay, so what I'm going to do is range A1 dot, not AutoFilter, it's current region because I want to color it, dot interior dot color. And we're going to set this equal to RGB, and I want it to be red, so 255.0.0. And then this is going to allow us to filter the data, and then any of the ones that are in grade of F will actually be filtered out. Alright, so once we have this set, the next thing we're going to do is run it, and what you'll notice is that it filters everything out. Alright, now what it did though is it hid all of the other rows. Now that might be what I want it to do, but in this case I just simply wanted it to color those particular fields. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to apply some sort of different condition to it. Alright, so I'm going to leave it with the grade of an F here, and what you'll notice also is that the header rows, the name, the grade, and the letter also turn red because the very last condition that is in the range, or not in the range, but in the list of auto filters, is the one that's going to be applied to the header row. So we'll fix that in just a minute. All right, so I want to do something where we also want to show the A's as being green. So before we do that, though, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on all of the rows. So we're going to do active sheet dot show all data. And this is going to be the very last line in here because we want this to happen after it applies all the filters. And then now what that does is it shows all of the rows to us. So what it does is it will filter all the data out. It does collapse them, it hides all the other rows, and then active sheet dot show all data then turns around and re-shows them all to us. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to do the green for the A's. All right, so I'm going to say range, and then we're starting at A1 again because we're defining where the header row is. And then auto filter, still the same field, and this is going to be field equal to 3. And the criteria 1, now notice it's criteria 1 again because it's the criteria for this specific instance of the auto filter. All right, so we're going to equal to A, and then range, and then A1 dot current region dot interior dot color is equal to RGB, and we're going to color green, so 0, 255, 0. And then now what this will do for us is it will color the A's as green. Now notice that the A and coloring it green is the last thing, so therefore the header row becomes green. All right, so how do we get the header row to not be colored green? There are a couple of ways we can do it. One is to use what's called an offset, and then we can offset the range that we're actually trying to consider. The problem with that is that it would actually color row 12 green, and we don't want that. So we can kind of trick it by simply giving it another range, an auto filter, and then it just simply will ignore this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to say range and then A1 dot auto filter. Once again on field 3, the criteria is going to be if it's equal to nothing. I'm just simply giving it a dummy field to try to filter. All right, and if it's equal to nothing, so like row 12 all the way down to 65,000, whatever, then those are all going to get colored with no fill. So we're going to say range A1 dot current region dot interior dot color is equal to, and then there's actually a function that we can use called XL none, and then XL none is actually going to be no filter. That's like no fill. All right, so we run this. Now what happened was it colored the header row red, then it colored the header row green, then it took away the fill in the header row. So we're kind of tricking it because the last condition is always going to get applied to the header row. We're tricking it into just simply ignoring that header row and leave it as not colored. Now, this looks kind of messy, and I want to fix it, but what you'll notice here is that the beginning of each one of these starts with range A1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this where we can use a with statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say with, and then all of these underneath of here, I can get rid of the range A1 and simply tab over. So we're just simply going to get rid of range A1 on all these. We're going to make it look nicer. And actually what it'll do for us by using a with statement is going to be that if we want to start doing other filters in here using the same range, then all we have to do is just simply add them without having to specify the range again. And if the range changes, we only have one place where we need to change the range now. So now what we can do is we can run it. It still works the same way as before. Everything's colored exactly like it was before, but now it just looks a little bit cleaner. Excel allows for what are called pivot tables, which is a powerful tool for quickly analyzing data from another perspective. And what I mean by that is that we can pivot the axes to quickly look at data differently. So let's say I have a sheet that has a whole bunch of sales for different divisions that we have over time, and they're going to be dates and ranges, and we have products that we sell. All of that stuff in separate sheets can very easily be confusing to look at. And what we can do is we can use a pivot table to form some sort of relationship between these and then actually just simply look at it a different way. Now, the original pivot table just simply changed the X and Y axes. In the new version, we actually have the ability to filter data out, and we can recalculate data based on field parameters. We can use VBA to manipulate the data from the pivot tables. It's not necessarily the best option for creating the pivot tables. The visual designer is actually a better job for the tool, but the VBA can be used to apply filters to it. It can be used to color things. It can be used to recalculate things as we need to, and it can be used to kick off pivot tables. And then also we can create charts from the pivot tables without having to manually calculate those. The pivot tables, though, is getting more advanced with each new version of Excel, so we're going to have new features that we can start using with each new version. We can use the filters on the data sets after the pivot table is generated, and this is going to be similar to the criteria range in this lesson or the if-then statements from prior lessons. We must delete any prior data sets before running the filter again, and the reason for that is prior data sets filter will still be applied and the data will not be restored to the prior state. So we just simply issue a command. It allows us to delete the data set, and then we recreate it. And then what we can do is we can filter on the values or the labels in the data set. There's an advanced pivot table function called the data model, and this allows the use of 2 or more worksheets or workbooks to function as one data source. And this is similar to the relationship that you have with databases and tables, so we can actually perform queries based on information from these separate workbooks and worksheets. The relationship, though, has to be configured manually via the GUI form. Once the relationships are configured, then Power Pivot is used to create the queries and to display the results, and then we can use VBA to manipulate the data set. So we can rearrange the data into views, we can do conditional formatting, we can recalculate things, but we are going to manually create it using the GUI first. I've downloaded the Northwind workbook from Microsoft. This is their sample company that they use for all of their different products. And what we have here is a workbook that has worksheets for categories, customers, employees, order details, orders, products, shippers, and suppliers. So all of this information is here. And if we want to try to use this information to try to find out which of our products sells the best in our Northwest region in Q3 of year 2015, we can't easily do that by directly looking at these workbooks. But if we use a pivot table and Power Pivot, we actually can get that information fairly easily. You'll notice that I have a new tab up here called Power Pivot, and we also have our data tab up here has Manage Data Model, and then Power Pivot also has Manage Data Model. Now what the Manage Data Model does is allows us to build out our relationship between these tables, and we're going to build it using a drag and drop type environment. It'll take just a minute for it to load. Alright, so what this does for us is it allows us to get external data, and we can do it from a database, from a data source, from other sources, or from existing connections. And so what I want to do is I want to open up this spreadsheet. So when I open this up, these are all the types of data connections that I can make. And you'll notice at the bottom, one of them is Excel. Now for me to use Excel, I actually have to close the open workbook. Otherwise, it'll throw an error. All right, so I've closed the workbook, and I want to get external data from another source. And we're going to specify that it's an Excel file. Next. And then we're going to give it a path here where that file is actually located. Okay, so here's the Northwind spreadsheet. And we're going to use the first row as column headers because it actually does have headers in there. Next. And what it's doing is it's reading in all of the workbooks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them and then finish. Now, there is the option here that says select related tables. That would allow it to automatically figure out all of our relations between them and only import the ones that we actually need that are related somehow. But in this particular case, we're just simply going to import all of them. So what happens is it imports them, and you'll notice that we actually have tabs down here at the bottom have the same information on them. And what this is it's just simply bringing it in so now we can actually filter data. So we can filter things. So if I only want to see cheeses and desserts, I can check just the ones that I want. We can sort things. And then we can also do our pivot tables directly from here. And we're going to create it in a new worksheet. And then what you'll notice over here on the side is that we have all of our tables that are listed. And then what we can do is we can pull them in. So if I want to see things about our, let's see, units in stock, and I want to see that over time, then let's see where we have time. Probably under the orders table we'll have time. There we go. All right, so now what it can do is it'll try to figure out the sum of the items we had in stock in whatever year it was that we were actually trying to keep that item in stock, and then we can start building out a query. Now, the thing is I'm building this using the visual interface, but we can do the same thing with VBA, but really what we're going to use VBA for is once it's built, then we're going to use it to customize it, to filter it, and to try to manipulate the data. Charts are an excellent way to visualize data from a range that may otherwise be hard to analyze, and VBA is able to take data from an existing worksheet and create various types of charts. I have a workbook that has a list of the quarters for our fictional business and all of the sales that we had per quarter. And what I want to do is I want to use this to chart out what our sales actually were over time. Now, just looking at that, quarter one we made 12,000, quarter two 13,000, and so forth, that doesn't really look very impressive. If I were going to go in for a sales meeting or something like that, I'd want to show a chart to make it look nice. So what I'm going to do is in VBA, I'm going to dimension a new chart sheet. Oops, sorry, first I have to actually give it a name, so we're going to call this make charts. Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to make a chart sheet. Now this is going to be what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a sheet at the bottom. We're going to have a new tab that's going to contain a chart. So I have to dimension it, and it's as a sheet. Sorry, not a sheet, as a chart. So we're going to create a chart. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to make a new instance of it. So what I have to do is I have to set chart sheet equal to charts.add. And so what that'll do is that'll add a new chart sheet for me, and we'll get a new tab at the bottom to hold it. All right, so what I want to do is I want to do some things like create a source for it, which is going to be the range that we're going to use, and tell it what kind of chart that I want to use. So I'm going to say with chart sheet 1, and then we're going to set source data, and the source is going to come from the sheet. And so where is the sheet? Well, it's in sheets, and then sheet 1. And then dot range. And what is our range? Well, our range in this case is going to be B2 through B5. So that's the range where the data actually comes from to make our chart. Okay, so I have an extra set of quotes here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I want to tell it what the chart type is. So dot chart type, and it's going to be equal to XL pi, and it's going to be a pie chart, and then we're going to end our with statement. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm just simply creating a new chart, and if you watch at the bottom down there by sheet 1, it will create a new tab with a chart on it that will contain our data. And so we have our new pie chart. Now the thing is the way that this is working right now is every time I create one of these, every time I run it, you'll notice I get a new chart sheet at the bottom there. Okay, eventually it's going to get kind of annoying because I don't want all of these other charts. I just want the one chart. So what I can do is I can tell the system, hey, delete all the old charts first, and then we can create a new one. All right, so what I'm going to do is before we add our new chart here, we're going to see if there are any existing charts. And then if there are, then we're going to delete them. So we're going to say if the active workbook dot charts dot count is greater than 0, then we're going to delete them. Now the catch is that if I just go ahead and try to delete something, it'll pop up a message on the screen asking, do you really want to do this? And I don't want the message to pop up. So to prevent that from popping up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say application dot display alerts, and we actually want to turn that off, so we're going to say is equal to false. And then we're going to delete all the charts that we have, so active workbook dot charts dot delete. And then we have to turn the display alerts back on. We always want to turn that on, or otherwise the user would never see any messages pop up. So if there's something that else that actually has a pop-up that should be showing up, it wouldn't be showing it. All right, so we're just simply going to see if there are any more charts, then we're going to delete them, and then we'll create the new one. All right, so now if I run this, now you'll notice that we have sheet 1 and chart 7 at the bottom. Now the catch is every time I run this, you're going to get a new chart number. And so it goes chart 10, chart 11, and so forth. All right, so we can kind of control that after we add the chart. The next thing we can do is we can actually set its name. So I'm going to say active chart dot name, and we're going to set this equal to sales chart. All right, so now when I run this, now it creates a new tab called sales chart, and it'll always be sales chart at the bottom. All right, so what if I want to change the chart type? All I do in here is I just simply state that I want it to be, say, a column clustered. All right, and then when I run this, spell it, run it again, and then we get our new chart. All right, so I decided to split the screen so you could see them side by side. I want to change some things. Okay, you'll notice that there's no title, there's no legend, there's no X and Y axes for the titles, and so I want to start adding that stuff to it. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to specify that it has a title. Now remember, we did the with chart sheet 1, so now we can do the dot and then has title, and this is going to be equal to true. And then what I want to do is I want to start using some of the existing data. Now our axes, the range for our quarters is going to be in the A column, and the range for our sales is in the B column. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my categories that they're going to come from the actual values for those ranges. Okay, so we're going to set dot axes and then XL category, XL primary, which means this is the primary category. And then we're going to set the dot has title. We're going to set that equal to true, so we're turning on our axes label. And then what I want to do is tell it where the actual title comes from. So where does that label come from? So it's going to come from the category XL primary, and it's going to have axis title dot characters dot text, and we're going to set it equal to whatever the range is for that worksheet. So we're going to say worksheets sheet 1 dot range of A1 dot value. Okay, so that's where it's actually getting the title from. Now the actual title of the chart is going to be sales by quarter, so we're going to say chart title dot text is equal to sales by quarter. And then we want to set the actual title on the left side there, or the label on the left side, so we're going to set that one axes and XL value XL primary dot has title is equal to true. And then we're going to set the dot axes XL value XL primary dot axis title dot characters dot text is equal to worksheets. Okay, we're going to pull it out of sheet 1. The range is going to be this time B1, and we're getting the values out of there. All right, so what we're doing is we're telling the system that we want it to pull the titles out of these different sections of our worksheet. All right, so let's go ahead and run it. And there we go. Now we get our title is sales by quarter. We have sales over here. We have quarter here at the bottom. And all of this stuff came from our sheet. It just simply came from here. So that's the title of quarter. That's the title of sales. The range for the quarters comes here. The range for the sales goes here. And then what we're doing is we're just simply making it where the chart just simply has all of the values in it. So this is quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. And then you can very easily look at it and see exactly what the sales were based on the quarter. All right, so I don't want the user to have to come into the code and press the play button to run it. What I want it to do is I want to make it where every time we change one of the values in this worksheet, that'll automatically refresh. And the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to right-click on the worksheet itself and view code. And then you'll notice over here, we come up with a new sheet 1 here. And what I can do is I can actually create a sub inside of here to refresh the chart. So I'm going to call it sub refresh chart. All right, so what we can do though is we want to look at the worksheet itself. So I'm going to say worksheet, and then it comes up here with selection change, but I don't want selection change. I want it anytime the actual workbook itself changes. All right, so what that means is that I can make my own routine for it. I could make it where something happens when the selection on the worksheet changes, or I can make it where when the worksheet itself changes that it does something. Well, what do I want it to do? I want it to call the section of code under module 1. So module 1 dot, and you'll notice we have make charts here. So what I can do is I can specify that when the workbook changes, I want it to run this make charts. Okay, so watch this. If I come over here and I change this to 11,000, press enter, and now this changed. All right, so now I'll go back over to sheet 1. This is, let's say this goes up to 20,000 now. Press enter, goes to the chart. Okay, now that's great, except it's kind of annoying because every time I put a new value in it, it immediately flips over to the chart, and I don't want it to do that. So for me to fix it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one line of code to the end of module 1. So after we do all of this stuff, the last thing I want to do is worksheets and then sheet 1 dot activate. So what it'll do is it'll create the chart and then just flip back over to sheet 1. That way it stops doing this thing where it flips over the chart all the time. So now what I can do is I can come over here, and if I change this to 12,000, and then I change this to 14,000, and this goes to 18,000, and then this one goes back down to 11,000. Now it ran the code and it updated the chart every time. You'll notice it should go, the first one should be 12, 14, 18, and then 11. So 12, 14, 18, and then 11. So it did update the chart behind the scenes, but it doesn't annoyingly flip me to the chart every time it updates it. It keeps me on the active sheet. In this lesson, you learned what the AutoFilter is and how to use it. You learned how to use the AutoFilter to filter out data, where we could actually look for criteria and then apply filters to it. You learned what a pivot table is and how to use it. You learned how to filter the data sets. You learned about the data model and how we can use that to pull in sources such as Excel spreadsheets and databases and treat them all as if they were a relational database and perform queries on them. And then you also learned about charts and how to use VBA to create a chart from data that exists in one of your spreadsheets.